In the new PvP game mode Push, your team has to push a conquest point to the enemy base to win the match. I'm Simmer, and here is my review and my comments on the Push game mode. I first want to clarify that this is my opinion and it's not a real, let's say, objective analysis. I try my best to do just that, but of course there are some subjective takes in here. I will start that I don't want to explain how it's played and how the meta currently is. It's just my feelings and my review of it. So let's start with the pros. I feel like it's a really nice game mode for people that want to fight. You constantly fight enemy players, most of the times even 5 versus 5. So it's a perfect place to learn how to fight in PvP and learn how to team fight. This is a really hard skill for especially new players to learn, because it can be quite overwhelming to see all the attacks and stuff happening. And I feel like it's a really good thing that this game mode encourages people to just learn it. And it's not cluttered with other stuff that you have to take into account, for example, rotating or anything else. You just have to focus on the enemy team and how to capture the conquest point. The next point here is that it's a really casual game mode. You just queue up and you don't have to think about it. You just get thrown into a match and you try your best to win, and it's over in 10 minutes maximum. Most of the matches are even shorter. So it's perfect for Guild Wars 2, I feel like, because Guild Wars 2 is idling itself as the casual MMO, and therefore it's really fitting to have a casual game mode in PvP. And I think a really good comparison here is like ARAM in League of Legends, because you just queue up, you don't have to really strategize, you don't have to have a really good team comp. Of course it helps, but in general it's just you go in, you fight, you try to do your best, and it's over in 5 to 10 minutes either way. That's also the next point here, because it snowballs really quickly. You could say that's a negative, but I feel like oftentimes in Conquest there is the problem that you feel like the match is lost after, let's say, a few minutes, because you feel like your one-on-one ally is always losing, or let's say you don't win the team fights and it's a slowly losing match, and you feel like you are stuck in the match for 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes even, because it feels like it's lost in the beginning and it still takes ages to finish up. In Push you don't have that issue. It oftentimes is you lose the first team fight and sometimes the point gets pushed until the end without any contest anymore. So it's over in a few minutes. And that's of course really frustrating if you lose, but you can go to the next match very fast then. So it's like the GG next mentality. And therefore, even if you lose, it's a nice feeling to get into the next match without being, let's say, tortured to stay in there for longer. And if you win, it's nice. You just win a match and go to the next and try your best again. So I feel like it's best for both situations. And it also leads to the fact that it's like more like the typical mentality you get from really good games, like just one more match, please. And every time you queue up, you play a game, it's 5 minutes or something, and then you come out and say, it's 5 minutes more, that's okay. And then you go into the next one. I feel like that's a really good thing to have, especially in a PvP game mode, so you have always people queuing. And the last point is, it probably will increase the PvP population. And I want to go into more detail on that in a later section of this video, in the Outlook. Be sure to check that out at the end. But I'm pretty sure this game mode will lead to an increase of the PvP population in Guild Wars 2. And therefore it's a pro by itself, even though if you don't like the game mode, it's increasing the population, and therefore it will improve match quality. But more in the Outlook. So let's get to the cons next. I feel like I have to mention here firstly, it's a beta. It's currently in beta. It's only 2 weeks in there in the current state. And of course, there are a lot of, let's say, not solved issues. For example, there are some bugs. They fixed some bugs already in hotfixes. But in general, it's not perfect, especially the map design itself has a lot of, let's say, unfinished assets like gray boxes and stuff. But that's a good thing because they show us the unfinished stuff and we can give our feedback as the players. And if we all think it's not good, they will stop developing it. And that's a good thing, because if they invest time in it and we don't get it in the end, even though they've invested a lot of time and we don't like it, it's not a good thing. So I feel like the bugs are okay. But I have to say, currently there are bugs, so you have to admit it, that it's there. And also I feel like it should have more UI, because sometimes it's really hard to see who has control of the node, and the whole map is actually rather big for that. It is only a, let's say, 1 point. And that's also the next point. I feel like people, especially the casual players, might even ignore the one node that is still on the node. So even though it has at least 2 nodes less than Conquest, it might still be 1 node too much for some players. And therefore I feel like you have to be really careful how to improve the UI to make it more easy for people to see, oh, we have to go to the point and don't fight off point, because the point is the central objective of the map. And I also feel like you have to maybe make some kind of tutorial for it, or some really nice introduction so that people really understand how this game mode plays, because there are some side objectives as well, which is good, so it's not completely linear, but you have to introduce them to people, because I feel like some people just ignore them and some people only go for that, and I feel like that's both not the best option. So you should always introduce it to people to get them, let's say, more knowledge out there. And now to the more serious issues. I feel, at least for me, it's even harder to carry as a solo player as a 5v5 Conquest ranked, that is. Feeling is, even if you play support, if you play hard damage dealer, whatever, sometimes your team is just inferior to the opposing team, and it's really hard to carry as a solo player. Even if you would 101 everyone in the enemy team, even as a DPS build, it doesn't matter, because your team is constantly feeding and doing something wrong. You have no possibility to carry the match then. Of course, you could 1v2 someone, but if there are still 3 people standing on the node and your team is dead, you can't capture the node. So it feels really frustrating sometimes. You are just in a match and you lose. But that gets back to the point I brought up in the pros, because of course it's over much faster. So even if you have the feeling this match is lost, it's over in a few minutes. So it's not that, let's say, of a time waste, and doesn't feel that bad. At least I feel like. And the next point here is also that if there is a skill mismatch between the 2 teams, so not, let's say, of a single player, but the whole team in itself. So if there's a slight mismatch here, it hits much harder. So if one team is slightly better at the game and wins the first team fight, it's very likely to win all the other teams' fights following up on that. And therefore you have no possibility to come back from a game. So it's not only that the game snowballs faster by itself. So if people just run in after one another, they feed and it's not easy to come back. But it's also, if they just wait for respawns and go back as 5 people, it still might be that they get stomped again. And therefore a skill mismatch is really frustrating. If it's just slightly, it could lead to the match being not fair at all. And therefore it needs a high population. And if it doesn't get the high population, we have a problem that there is no way to ensure that the mismatch of skill is not happening. So the con here is, it really needs a lot of people to play it to have this point not being, let's say, happening. And therefore, if it does get it, it's good. But if it doesn't get, it's a really frustrating point. Now to the last really big con I have here is that there are no strategic elements at all. So if you enjoy Conquest, where you have a lot of strategic elements, maybe some even new Conquest points like the Bell objective on Capricorn or the buffs on Temple, this is completely missing here. Of course, you have some buffs that come up, but it's always around this 1 point. So there is no rotation element to it. So you can't outnumber someone or like that. It's really frustrating for players that enjoyed this game mode. Aspect of Conquest, and therefore you also don't have this additional outplay potential that you would normally have. So you can't say, okay, I hold the 1v2 and I hold the point neutral in Conquest so that my map can win the rest of the map, my team can win the rest of the map. That's not happening here. So you always have to, let's say, carry the team fight that is constantly happening. If you can't do that, which I mentioned earlier is really tough to do, I think the match is just lost because you don't have the potential to outplay the whole enemy team. It's really unlikely. It's a whole different thing if you do a duo queue, for example. I think then it's easier, but still, it feels a little bit harder to carry as in a Conquest game. So I don't want to be a pessimist here, and therefore I also mention some alternatives and improvements now, which I feel like could help the game mode to get much better than it currently is. So I mentioned it before. I think the UI is missing a lot of stuff. For example, it should be really clear who currently has the point. Maybe even some indication how many players are currently in there. And also the buff got fixed, the debuff, I mean, that it shows now and it's applying correctly, but it still maybe needs some tuning that it's better to see and better to, let's say, debunker the node and stuff. So I feel like the UI has to be improved quite a lot. And also the map, of course, should get better over time. I feel like that's a given because there are some, let's say, like I said before, some gray boxes or stuff. But in general, I think the map should be a little bit more focused. The people should be more funneled into the match itself in the conquest point, not that they roam around like in World vs. World and are not contesting any nodes. I think that's bad. Therefore, maybe there are some map improvements as well in conjunction with the UI. And the biggest issue I feel like could be resolved. So if there's one match team losing the match by just feeding one after another, so they lose one player and then they lose another player and another player, and they respawn one after another, and every time they run in, and there's always a 3v5, 4v5 happening, so they instantly die again, and there's some staggered respawning. I feel that can be resolved easily by just making it a wave respawn. What does that mean? It does mean that you don't have a respawn timer that is fixed, that's always constant, like 20 seconds or something per player. So if you die, you have a 20 seconds respawn, that's how it's currently. But with the wave respawn, it would be like the team respawns every 20 seconds. So if you died, you have to wait a few seconds, but the whole team, even if it just died, will respawn at this time. So you don't have the issue anymore that people run in 1v5 just to contest the node or just to, I don't know what they think, but try to 1v5 the people, the enemy team. And therefore, the wave respawn would prevent that. So the whole team is respawning at the same time if they died. And this could solve some issues, and I feel like that's how it should be. Okay, so much for my improvement comments. Now to the future and the questions I have and how I feel like it could look in the future, how it could help. So I feel like it's a little bit of a question how they will implement it. So will this be some kind of extra queuing system outside of the current unranked and ranked session? Or will it be some kind of replacement for unranked or even ranked? I don't know. So what's the issue here? Or will it be just some, let's say like 2v2 or 3v3, some off-season gameplay like it's currently in the beta? I think that's a huge thing how it will impact the game. And I feel like it's important that they make it clear what they want it to be. Because if it's a lukewarm solution, so it will be implemented to some extent, but they don't commit all in on it, I think that's a really risky approach. Why is that? I feel like if they do a lukewarm approach, they will lose the opportunity to improve the game mode how good it could be. And therefore, they waste some development time into something that is not perfect, but they will also split the player base. Because, of course, people that currently queue for Conquest will not queue for Push at the same time. And therefore, you will split the player base and might even decrease the population in both game modes. In total, they will stay the same or maybe increase, but the general in the special game mode like Push or in Conquest itself, it will decrease, and the matches will be even worse than they are currently from the matchmaking because the population is too low. So I feel like either they should go all in on Push, or they should say, okay, we do it like it's for unranked to learn, and it's in ranked we still have the Conquest and in ATs. So if they do that, I feel like it could be some kind of, let's say, introduction into PvP. You just fight enemies in unranked to learn how the PvP system works and how you, let's say, could improve by learning skills and stuff. And then if you really want to go ranked, you have to go into Conquest, and the player base is not split that much, at least. But then is the question, of course, how is rewards tuned? I think that's also important. And also a very important issue is that I think you need some kind of, to queue for ranked now, you need 100 matches or something in let's say, on average, to get the possibility to play ranked, because you have to be level 20 in PvP. So I feel like if they force you to play some Push to learn how PvP works and then go into ranked in the Conquest, that could be a good thing. But it's also, if you want to play Conquest right at the beginning, and I think that's some issues you have to discuss beforehand. And of course, maybe even just go all in Push and say, okay, Conquest is too hard for most players, let's play Push only. And that's obviously a sad thing for me, because I like Conquest, and a lot of really good people also think Conquest is the better game mode. But still, if no one is playing it, I think the better solution is to have Push, where the population might be much higher. But in total, I would say that probably if Push gets pushed, sorry for the pun here, we might see an overall increase in player population in PvP. So I feel I am slightly optimistic that it will increase the player base in total, and therefore the match quality will go up. And if it implemented well and improved a lot, I feel like it could save the current PvP scene and try to improve Conquest overall, because that's what Conquest is currently lacking the most. It's just players. And if Push can save it, I feel like that's a pro in itself. So therefore, that's my end on this topic, and I hope it will turn out like that. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like. Let me know your take on this in the comments. And if you want to see more content like this, don't forget to subscribe. Hope to see you in the next video.